You are living a life that is not yours. You feel it, even if you try to suppress it, even if you pretend everything is fine. You wake up every day, follow your routine, do what is expected, deliver what others ask for, but deep down, there is a feeling that doesn't leave you. A kind of emptiness that no achievement can fill. An uncomfortable sensation that you are out of place, as if you are playing a role in a play written by someone who never truly knew you. You may have even followed the right path, studied, worked hard, sought stability, did what your family taught you, what society applauds. But none of that seems enough. Why? Because this story did not originate from you. It was imposed, disguised as responsibility, prudence, normality. But the truth is that you have been living as an edited version of yourself. And the worst part? You have gotten used to it. You learned to smile in photos, to repeat the right phrases, to maintain the facade. But inside you, the chaos continues to accumulate. Carl Jung called this betrayal of the self. When you silence your true impulses, when you ignore your dreams, when you reject your deepest intuitions, you are betraying the most authentic part of who you are. And this betrayal has a price. Unexplained anxiety, a feeling of stagnation, a constant discomfort with your own existence. It's the unconscious trying to scream while you insist on keeping everything under control. Jung said that the soul sends signals, dreams, persistent desires, wills that insist on returning, and ignoring these signals is like turning off a fire alarm and pretending everything is under control while everything around you is on fire. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about in this video. The only rule that Jung considered essential for anyone who wants to become whole. Stop trying to live a story that is not yours. This phrase is not a self-help advice. It's a bombshell. Because it forces you to face an uncomfortable truth. A good part of your life may be based on external expectations. And the more you try to fit in, the more you fragment inside. Paulo Coelho, one of the most influential writers of our time, understood this when he wrote The Alchemist. What seems to be just a simple fable is, in fact, a psychological treatise disguised as a novel. Santiago, the young shepherd, is the exact portrait of who you are now. He also started following a path that made sense to others, a safe, predictable life without great risks, until the dreams began to disturb him, repetitive, insistent, as if the unconscious was pushing him towards something he still couldn't comprehend. And you, honestly, are also having these dreams. Perhaps not while you sleep, but while you live. They manifest as existential fatigue, as that desire to drop everything, as that question that echoes in silence. What if my life could be different? This video is for you who feel you are playing the wrong role, who is tired of pretending. Who knows, deep down, that there is a truer life waiting for you, but doesn't know how to find it. Here, we will decode the deep psychology behind the work The Alchemist, show how each character is a living archetype of the individuation journey described by Jung, and guide you in this process that is not easy, but is necessary. The journey back home. Not the home where you live, but the home that exists within you. The only place where you can finally be who you truly are. From now on, the question remains, will you continue playing the role that was given to you? Or will you have the courage to write your own story? Carl Gustav Jung did not believe in ready-made formulas. He knew that the human psyche was too complex to fit into labels or recipes. But among all his teachings, there was one truth he repeated with an almost relentless clarity. The greatest burden a child can carry is the unlived life of the parents. And this phrase echoes like a silent earthquake within anyone who has grown up trying to please, adapt, belong. Jung's only rule, and perhaps the greatest challenge of a lifetime, is this. Stop trying to live a story that is not yours. But what does that mean in practice? It means that every time you act to meet an external expectation, you drift a little further away from yourself. It means that every decision made out of fear of displeasing, of being rejected, or of seeming irrational fragments you inside. It means that when you force your soul to follow a script that did not arise from your unconscious, you go to war with yourself. And this war, sooner or later, will demand its toll. Jung discovered, by diving into the studies of alchemy and dreams, that every human being carries within them a unique script of individuation, a symbolic path that leads from the persona, the social mask, to the self, the total essence of being. But this path is not comfortable. It requires ruptures. It demands losing everything that is false to begin building something true. And the first step of this process is daring to listen to what is within. What bothers you, what you try to ignore, what attracts you even if it seems unreasonable. All of this is clues. They are internal maps. They are signs of your own story wanting to emerge. Most people live like emotional puppets. They react, repeat, obey, without ever asking themselves, is this really what I want? And the most tragic thing is that often we confuse security with truth. We accept an empty career because it pays well. We maintain relationships out of fear of being alone. We endure suffocating routines in the name of a stability that, deep down, is just fear disguised as maturity. But Jung warned us, the worst prison is the one built with bricks of comfort. And that is why the rule is so simple and so devastating. Stop living a story that is not yours. This does not mean you should abandon everything all at once, but rather that you should start paying attention. For real. Start questioning the roles you are playing. Observe the moments when you stay silent, when you wanted to scream, the places where you feel out of place, even while smiling. The decisions you made that, deep down, were never yours. This rule is not about external revolution. It is about internal revolution. It is about reclaiming your original narrative, the one that exists before the scars, before the traumas, before the conditioning. Because if you do not do this, you will be just a character in the theater of someone else's life. And the worst part, no one will notice. Everyone will applaud. They will say you did everything right, but only you will know that you are dying inside. Jung knew that this call does not come as a loud voice. It comes as discomfort, as dissatisfaction, as that feeling that something is missing, even when, theoretically, you have everything. And it is precisely there that the true inner work begins. Now, imagine if there were a mirror that showed exactly this. How much of your life is real, and how much is theater? And what if that mirror were a book? And what if that book were the work The Alchemist? In the next part, we will dive into this work that seems simple at first glance, but which, under the lens of deep psychology, reveals itself as a true laboratory of inner transformation. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. The Alchemist is not just a story about a shepherd who dreams of a treasure. It is a living metaphor about the deepest process a human being can experience, the journey back to oneself. Paulo Coelho, consciously or unconsciously, wrote a Jungian treatise disguised as a spiritual novel. And that is exactly why the book has touched millions of people around the world. Not because it teaches, but because it reveals. Because it acts as a symbolic mirror where each reader, in a unique way, sees their own soul reflected. Santiago is the personification of the modern individual. He has an apparently peaceful life with stability, routine, and a defined path. He is a shepherd, knows his sheep, understands the rhythm of the seasons and the geography of the fields. But despite all this, something disturbs him. A recurring dream, a vision that insists on returning. And Jung taught us that recurring dreams are not mere nightly repetitions. They are messages from the unconscious trying to break through the confines of the rational mind. It is the self, the totality of the psyche, calling the ego to the journey of transformation. The treasure Santiago seeks is not really beneath the sands of Egypt. It is within him. But for him to realize this, it is necessary to cross real and symbolic deserts. And here lies the power of the book. Each step of Santiago's journey is an archetypal representation of our own internal stages. When he leaves everything behind, he is not just abandoning the flock, he is renouncing the persona, the social mask, the inherited identity. When he follows the signs, even without fully understanding, he is accepting the movement of the unconscious. He is surrendering to the journey of individuation. The book becomes a psychological mirror because it does not offer ready-made answers. It presents symbols. It presents characters that function as psychic aspects. And most impressively, each reader will identify with a different part of the story. Some will see themselves at the beginning, full of doubts and attachments. Others will recognize themselves in the moment of blind faith, when everything seems to be crumbling. And there are those who, in the end, clearly realize that the treasure they were seeking has always been exactly where they started, but that, without the journey, they would never have eyes to see it. Jung said that what irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. In The Alchemist, what touches us deeply is precisely this. The parts of the book that most move us are those that expose our own wounds, our blockages, our buried desires. The book is like a magnifying lens of the soul. It does not tell you what to do. It shows you who you are. And this narrative structure is not random. It follows exactly the stages of alchemy described by Jung in Psychology and Alchemy, the symbolic process of the transformation of the soul. Santiago goes through Negredo, the initial darkness of doubt, loss, and disorientation, then through Albedo, when he begins to see more clearly what really matters, and finally through Rubedo, the integration of the inner gold, the encounter with the treasure, which is in fact the discovery of oneself. But to understand this process in its entirety, we need to analyze more deeply the characters that Santiago meets along the way, because each of them represents a psychological choice, a possibility of destiny, an archetypal mirror that reveals what happens when someone listens to or ignores the call of the self. In the next part, we will dive into these characters. We will understand what exactly they represent. Every character that crosses Santiago's path in The Alchemist is not there by chance. They are not just supporting characters in a heroic journey. They are symbolic representations of psychic forces that reside within all of us. Paulo Coelho created a narrative where each encounter carries an archetypal dilemma. Jung would call this confrontations with the unconscious, moments when the ego is challenged to choose between remaining in the known or plunging into the unknown towards the self. And here, once again, fiction reveals itself to be psychologically accurate. The first major encounter happens with the king of Salem, Melchizedek. He appears as the one who awakens, the one who names Santiago's restlessness and gives it meaning. In Jungian terms, he is the archetype of the mentor, the manifestation of ancestral wisdom that resides in the collective unconscious. Jung saw figures like this as agents of the self, who emerge in a person's life at the exact moment when the internal call begins to become unbearable to ignore. Melchizedek offers the young shepherd a choice: to continue living his inherited story or to follow the path of his own personal legend. We all encounter this mentor at some point in life, sometimes in the form of a book, a therapist, an unexpected event. But not everyone has the courage to listen. Later on, Santiago meets the Englishman, the scholar obsessed with alchemical books. He represents the type who seeks knowledge, but not transformation. He wants the formula, the theory, the method, but does not want to relinquish control. He is the symbol of the intellectual who takes refuge in the mind to avoid the pain of inner diving. Jung said that one of the greatest dangers of the psychological path is intellectual inflation, believing that knowing something is the same as living it. The Englishman is the one who wants the philosopher's stone, but fears the fire of transformation. And if you have ever felt that you know everything about change, but cannot change, then perhaps this character is your mirror. The crystal merchant is even more subtle and more dangerous. He represents the archetype of the conformist, the one who heard the call but chose to ignore it. He openly talks about his dreams of pilgrimage to Mecca, but he never left the shop. He prefers to keep the dream alive as an idea rather than risk seeing it destroyed in reality. And this is the portrait of millions of people who live feeding future fantasies to numb the pain of a stagnant existence. Jung would say that this is the ego that refuses to die, that clings to the comfort zone even when it suffocates the soul, and worse. This character is not a villain. He is likable, human, real. Because he is within us, always trying to convince us that it's not the right time, it's not worth the risk, better to leave it for later. And then the alchemist emerges, the most mysterious and powerful of guides. He does not explain, he provokes. He does not answer, he silences. He represents the integrated self, the one who has already traveled the journey and now guides others. In symbolic terms, he is the highest aspect of the psyche, the one who knows the processes of death and rebirth, who understands that true gold is not material, but spiritual. The alchemist knows that to transform lead into gold, one must accept the fire, and that this fire, in Jung's language, is the confrontation with the shadow, with pain, with the loss of the ego. These characters are not just literary figures, they are internal possibilities. You have been the shepherd, you have been the merchant, you have tried to be the alchemist before your time. And perhaps you are now before the mentor, receiving the call to finally follow your own journey. This is how the alchemist works. It does not tell you who you are. It shows you who you can be, depending on the choices you make in front of each archetype. But none of these choices is simple, because before finding any treasure, one must go through trials, obstacles, failures, injustices. And these events, which seem like punishments, are actually the alchemical process of ego destruction. In the next part, we will dive into this process. Every true transformation begins with a death. Not a physical death, but a symbolic one. The death of the false identity, the social persona, the roles you learned to play to be accepted. Carl Jung called this stage mortificatio, the beginning of the alchemical process of individuation. It is when the ego, inflated with certainties and defenses, begins to crumble. And it hurts. It hurts because you start to realize that you built your life on structures that now seem fragile, empty, soulless. And this is exactly what happens to Santiago throughout his journey. When he leaves his hometown, he is not just crossing geographies. He is crossing an internal boundary between the known and the unknown, the ego and the unconscious. And the first thing he encounters is loss. Early on, he is robbed. He is left without money, alone, disoriented. This is the first collapse, the fall of the illusion of control. It is the universe saying, "Do you want the truth? Then you will have to give up security." Jung knew that this moment was inevitable. The soul demands authenticity, and there is no room for that while you are trying to keep everything in order, everything right, everything under control. Every obstacle Santiago faces is, in fact, an initiatory ritual. When he carries glass up the hill, when he is disappointed, when he is misunderstood, he is being purified. Because you do not find a treasure with hands dirty from fear. You do not reach fulfillment carrying weights that are not yours. The alchemical journey is violent with the ego, but compassionate with the soul. It tears you away from the lies you told to survive, only to return you to the life you were born to live. This symbolic death can also come in the form of failures, disappointments, illnesses, unexpected ruptures. Jung said that the unconscious, when ignored, manifests through symptoms. It paralyzes you, sabotages you, makes you ill, not out of malice, but out of mercy. Because it knows that pain, sometimes, is the only way to make us listen. And when you start to look at these pains not as punishments, but as messengers, something changes. The desert ceases to be a place of punishment and becomes a temple. Loneliness ceases to be suffering and becomes listening. The fall ceases to be humiliation and becomes preparation. Santiago understands this when, in the middle of the desert, he is forced to trust the invisible. When the external world stops providing guarantees, he is compelled to develop internal listening. And this is profoundly Jungian. True wisdom does not come from outside. It comes from contact with the self, this greater psychic instance that is you, but lives within you. It is the inner alchemist who guides, instructs, transforms. But it only appears when the ego quiets down, when the mask falls, when the resistance surrenders. Mortificatio is the beginning of the alchemical process, but it is not the end. After destruction comes reconstruction. After darkness, clarity. Jung called this albedo, the stage in which the soul begins to purify, intuition sharpens, and the new begins to be born. But before getting there, you need to endure the collapse. Not flee from it, not anesthetize, not run back to the old story. Because if you escape the pain, you escape the transformation. And the worst, you will remain trapped in a life that does not belong to you. In Santiago's case, it is only after these sufferings that he begins to see the signs more clearly. The synchronicities intensify, the intuition strengthens. He begins to trust himself more and external structures less. And this is the harbinger that the gold is near. Not the literal gold, but the essence, the wholeness, the self. In the next part, we will explore what these signs really mean. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. Carl Jung dedicated a large part of his life to the study of dreams. For him, dreams were not just random manifestations of the mind. They were letters written by the unconscious, symbolic messages pointing to directions that the ego has not yet had the courage to consider. Recurring dreams in particular persist because something within us is insisting to be heard. They do not go away because the call has not yet been answered. And that is exactly what happened to Santiago in The Alchemist. The young shepherd repeatedly dreams of a treasure hidden in the pyramids of Egypt. At first glance, it seems just a daydream, but symbolically, this dream is an archetypal map. The treasure represents the self, the deepest core of the psyche, what you truly are but have not yet accessed. The pyramids, in turn, symbolize ancestry, hidden wisdom, the eternal. The fact that the dream repeats indicates that there is a part of Santiago, the truest part, that will not rest until he follows this call. Jung said that the unconscious communicates with us all the time, not just when we sleep. It also manifests through sudden intuitions, desires we cannot explain, restlessness that insists on returning. You feel an absurd urge to change cities, to end a relationship, to start something new. And everything seems irrational. But the force of this impulse is so great that, even without evidence, you feel you must obey. This is the self trying to take the reins. Not because the ego has failed, but because it is time for something greater to be born. In The Alchemist, Santiago learns to follow the omens, the signs, and Paulo Coelho, here, hits the heart of archetypal psychology. These signs are not magical in the cheap mystical sense. They are synchronicities, as Jung called them, significant coincidences that occur in the external world and mirror what is happening within you. When the soul is aligned with your purpose, the external world begins to respond symbolically. People appear at the right moment. Unexpected opportunities arise. Obstacles become revelations, and even without rational understanding you feel, I am on the right path. But to see these signs, you must first silence the noise of the ego. You need to step out of automatic mode, set aside the constant need for control, and allow yourself to feel, listen, observe. Santiago only begins to understand the language of the world when he accepts that there is a greater intelligence acting through him. And this has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with psychic openness, with the willingness to trust that there is something within you that knows where you need to go, even if you do not yet know how to get there. How many times have you had an impossible dream and tried to bury it? How many times have you felt an inexplicable desire for something and immediately dismissed it as nonsense? What you do not realize is that by doing this, you are rejecting your own inner guide. And that is why life begins to seem directionless, because you ignored the map. And the unconscious, tired of being silenced, begins to scream in the form of anxiety, dissatisfaction, apathy, psychosomatic illnesses. Jung believed that the greatest mistake of modern man was the arrogance of thinking he could ignore his inner life without consequences. He said that sooner or later, the unconscious demands its price, and it is high. It comes in the form of existential crises, emotional collapses, feelings of emptiness. But all of this is not punishment. It is an invitation. It is the insistent call for you to stop living a programmed life and start living an authentic life. Santiago only finds his treasure because he decides to honor what he feels, even when everything seems absurd. He follows the signs, even when he has no guarantees. He chooses intuition, even when it challenges logic. And that is what separates those who awaken from those who remain asleep. In the next part, we will reach the climax of this journey, the moment when the treasure is finally revealed. But not as we expected. When Santiago finally arrives at the pyramids, exhausted, transformed, hoping to dig and find gold, he does not find what he imagined. He is beaten by thieves, humiliated, reduced to nothing. Everything seems to have been in vain. But there, at that point of total breakdown, he receives the revelation. The treasure he was seeking was always buried where it all began, beneath the abandoned church where he had his first dream. The message, at first glance, seems cruel. How so? All the pain, all the journey, all the suffering, to discover that what he was looking for was always there. But that is where the deepest secret of the alchemist lies, and the exact point where Jung's psychology finds its maximum expression. The treasure was not there at the beginning. It only came to exist because Santiago went to the end of the journey, because it was the crossing, the desert, the failures, the losses, the encounters with archetypes. It was all of this that transformed him. The gold was never the goal. The gold was him. The true alchemical process is not about finding something outside. It is about becoming what you truly are inside. Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." Santiago dreamed, looking outside. But he only awakened when he understood that the journey was internal. The treasure is not literal, it is symbolic. It is the state of consciousness achieved by those who have the courage to face their shadow, renounce external expectations, die symbolically, and be reborn, more authentic, more whole, more alive. Perhaps you are waiting for recognition, love, meaning, in places that can never offer you that, and that everything you have lived up to now, the pains, the frustrations, the repeated cycles, were not punishments, but invitations. Invitations to your individuation journey. Invitations to stop living the story that was written for you and finally take authorship of your own narrative. There are no shortcuts to this. There is no ready map. Each human being carries a unique psychic configuration. And that is why the Alchemist touches so many people in different ways, because it does not give you answers. It returns the essential question to you. Who would you be if you stopped pretending? You will need to cross the desert of your soul. You will need to face your conditioning, your masks, your fears in the face of life's challenges. You will have to listen to what you spent years trying to silence. You will have to die to who you thought you should be, and be reborn as who you always were. And this starts now, with a choice. The choice to no longer ignore the discomfort, to no longer trivialize your dreams, to no longer accept the comfortable lie of a life that keeps you trapped. You are standing in front of a door, and on the other side of it, there is your own story, but no one will cross it for you. If this video made you reflect in some way, if it touched something you perhaps didn't even know was inside you, write in the comments, "I am ready to live my story." Because by writing this, you are not speaking to me, you are speaking to yourself. Keep watching the next video. It is important. Because this journey does not end with an answer, but continues with a new question. See you there.